What's up, everyone? Sean here, and welcome to another episode of the Hawke Talks. I just came back from Evo. Had a good time during the weekend, and then some on the weekday. But naturally, of course, there's bound to be some sort of news that comes up during the weekend. You know, it's the big video game esports tournament weekend, of course. So yeah, things like that are bound to pop up or whatever. But this time is a little different because it involved with a shooting in Texas. It was a gruesome shooting, from what I've heard. Dozens of people died from the shooting. So, and of course, more people were injured, of course, during the process, I believe. But I only looked in briefly into it. But what I saw, it is pretty brutal. So my heart and condolences go out to the victims who have lost their loved ones in that event. It is definitely unfortunate that these things are considered to be somewhat of a commonplace here in America, North America anyway, or to be more specific, the United States. But the point I wanted to address here in this video is just the fact that, once again, the mass media and of course the politicians, including our president, Donald Trump, is bringing up are bringing up the argument of video games is causing this kind of violence, including mass shootings and stuff. And there's always been like the connection with video games and violence to some extent because the shooter happened to play video games as a pastime or whatever, but they just use that as a scapegoat of sorts to blame it on. So they don't have an actual real answer as to what really causes these things. So on the surface, they want to shift the blame towards video games. It's just an easy thing to just try to distract us to, when there's of course a much deeper answer as to what really causes these things, and at least here in the United States. So as someone who has played video games prominently, definitely for this channel, but just in real life as well, I definitely enjoy my fair share of video games as a passionate hobby as well. I have to. I feel like I would like to speak out on this. Especially after watching Angry Joe being very vocal about it, and to the point where he actually let himself appear on Spectrum News, and that was actually really cool for him to get reached out like that. So at least then we can spread some awareness that, hey, video games aren't really the number one link to mass shooting and stuff. So so of course, obviously, my opinion here is that yes, video games aren't really linked to mass shootings of sorts, or just any violence in general. There's always this argument from people, like these video games are just like the root of these evils and stuff, and things like this have happened in the past. Not just with video games, but believe it or not, with like music, especially with like metal, and even in the past I believe, was considered the devil's music or something. I think it's the 50s, 60s, or even 70s, excuse me. But point being, Elvis's music at one point was considered as the devil's work or whatever. So things like this have repeated over and over again in history, and here we are again with people blaming it on some sort of some media of some sorts that we look into as a form of entertainment. So and like I said, movies have gone through the same thing at some point too, even like comic books as well, with all this like violence that we see in comics as well. I'm kind of surprised that not even like anime comes into play, but maybe that's because a lot of anime involves with like fan service or erotics fan service or ecchi, or just anime girls just showing off their assets, that sort of thing. So maybe that's why that's a whole nother subject. But point being, there is violent anime as well, of course. and I'm surprised that they haven't linked that to mass shootings of some kind. So I feel like this argument is easily debunked because you look at other major countries such as Europe and Japan, as Angry Joe pointed out in this video on Spectrum News, that Japan had at least in per capita anyway has more sales or whatever, and we don't see any gun violence or whatever because of course there are less guns in Japan, of course, if not very little to zero guns in Japan, unless you go through a bunch of paperwork or whatever. But point being, Japan isn't linked to video games and violence or by any means. Japan has its own share of violent acts in that country, and there's like no way that Japan that's linked with video games, because it's such a separate, a whole separate thing. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't add up. And of course we have countries like Europe, where they also play video games. And I believe they're prominent to certain games like Counter-Strike. There's they have very strong teams in Europe involved with Counter-Strike or other certain shooting games and stuff. And of course, just gaming in general in Europe is also popular. And yet there aren't any too many reports of Japan, Europe having these mass shootings as well. So what does that really tell you? You know what I mean? Like, so if other countries aren't really having these mass shootings, but America is, so why is it that video games are being blamed here? Because it's just an easy scapegoat. It just happens so these violent video games are being popular amongst media consumption, including like GTA and Call of Duty and all these other shooting games. Of course, I guess Fortnite to some extent. I guess Assassin's Creed or whatever. Stuff like that. It's just so easy to blame it on those kind of things. And meanwhile, we as Americans are attempted to be diverted in a whole nother direction from the actual real answer. And the real answer, here, I don't want to go into it too much, but it's just so many factors as to why these things happen. Obviously the psychological health of that shooter or that perpetrator, and the parents that might have some sort of effect, or the environment that they grew up in, or some sort of traumatizing event that occurred in their lives and kind of changed them forever, sort of thing. We really don't know. There's no real answer, right away. It's just very case by case for many of these shooters and these cases, of course, and you just really can't find that one simple answer, and that's what we humans naturally want to hear. So that's why Americans are just so easy to blame it on video games, because yes, again, they just happen to be very popular as of right now. They're always on the front page of media consumption, and right, and of course GTA is one of those games that have been brought up in these kind of cases. So because it has shooting, you can run over people with cars and stuff like that. So these things are just so common nowadays. It's just it's getting tiresome, honestly. I am sick of it, of course, just like everyone else. We all know that it's not the case here. So it's just there's just a whole lot of factors that occur in America that act like seeds to these cases. Again, it could just be the environment that we grew up in, or it could be the people who have been influenced by, or the shit that we've gone through. They were bullied, or just because we're different and we just break down mentally or whatever. Also, just the hate between the whole race thing too. There's a lot of there's a lot of these hate cultures and stuff like that that just occur here in America, and it's they can all be part of these factors that causes this person to do these acts. So again, there's like really no one answer to anything, but of course politicians and mass media want to create that one answer, and that happens to be video games. So of course this isn't gonna go away anytime soon by any means, but just remember that it really isn't video games. Like, come on, is it really that simple? Are we really easily swayed by these things? Is that what they're trying to like paint here? Like, do they really think that we're that stupid or easily just manipulated by the movies we've watched or the music we listen to or the video games that we play or anything like that? Like, come on, like it's very, very down. They're just downplaying us and looking down on us, and they just see us as just, I guess, rats in the, an experiments of some kind. That we can be easily controlled and like that. But anyway, I don't want to go into it too much. I just wanted to talk about it because, hey, video games and stuff like that, and I definitely wanted to put in my 2 cents about it. So, anyways, this has been a very laid back and traditional and classic episode of the Hawke Talks with gameplay and me talking over it. So that's all I have to say about these violent acts and video games being blamed on and stuff. I mean, gamers are just people as well. People are just violent, and we do these crazy acts at times because something is bottling up inside us and it just explodes, one day, you know what I mean, if we're not too careful or anything like that. So there's no real easy solution to it either. It's like it's definitely hard, and again, this is such a case by case thing, so we don't know what the root of all this is or coming from. So it's coming up with a cure is almost just so difficult. So anyway, that's all I had to say. Thank you guys so much. If you have any comments about the subject I was talking about, please let me down below. I'll love to check them out, and don't forget to like and subscribe, of course. It really helps out. Really appreciate it, guys. And also, please check out the sponsorships down below in the description, and check out the social media stuff. That also is further support for the channel. So anyways, this has been the Hawke Talks on violent acts and video games, whether they're linked to them or not. So again, I don't think that's the case. There's more to it than just that. They are just trying to paint us as stupid people. So I mean, we're not that easily swayed. Come on, guys. We should all know this by now. But anyway, thank you guys so much. I'll see you guys in the next video. Ciao now.